Oregon fans, what's going on? How we doing? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. In case you're new here, I'm your host, Max Torres. We are live on YouTube. YouTube.com/Oregon Football Max Torres is where you can find us. As always, we are here to break down Oregon's 49-10 win over Colorado. Admittedly, this is a little bit later than I would have liked to do the podcast, but I was actually able to take a little camping trip this weekend. Hard to find the right time to do those things during football season, but that's why this episode is coming to you when it is. So apologies for the delay, and glad to have you here on board, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your podcasting platform of choice. Like, comment, and subscribe. Always appreciated on the videos here to make sure that you guys stay up to date with all things Ducks here on the Ducks Dish podcast. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to talk some defense, talk some offense, talk about some big picture takeaways from Oregon's win over Colorado as we also now start looking ahead a little bit to Oregon's big top 25 matchup against the Washington Huskies this week in Eugene. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about Oregon's offense in this big win over Colorado. Again, the story really starts and ends, I think, with Bo Nix, although there was more to it than just Bo Nix. But to get into his day against the Buffs, he was 20 for 24 passing for 274 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had a long of 58, which was actually in one of the earlier plays in the game, the completion, the catch and run to Chris Hudson that he almost broke for a touchdown in this game, but he got horse-collared towards the end and wasn't able to get in the end zone on that one. But this is another really strong showing from Bo Nix, and he's really been Mr. Consistent for this Oregon offense and Kenny Dillingham on the year. Just getting into some more notes on his performance. 5 total touchdowns for the 3rd straight game and 5th time this season. 13 rushing touchdowns on the year. Ties him with Jeremiah Masoli from the 2009 season for the 2nd most by an Oregon quarterback in a single season. And now he's just 2 shy of Marcus Mariota's record of 15 rushing touchdowns from 2014. So Bo Nix is doing a little bit of everything for Oregon once again. And what made this game a little bit interesting for Bo Nix and the Oregon offense was how windy it was. It might have been a little bit hard to tell on the broadcast, but I know some Oregon fans that are watching this or listening to this made the trip out to Boulder. And Dan Lanning said after the game that this was the windiest game that he has ever coached in. Definitely a unique element, kind of having to battle the weather. And what made it tough was that it was changing intensities, changing directions. Obviously, always something that you have to account for when you're playing the elements, and maybe a little bit different also with the added elevation that comes with playing in Boulder. And then Bo also talked about after the game how that was a challenge for him, how playing in the Pac-12, playing out west has kind of forced him to adapt and learn how to play in various types of weathers. It's not always just hot like you maybe see more consistently in the SEC. Probably a lot more indoor venues in the SEC would be my guess than the Pac-12, but I'd have to fact check that one to be absolutely sure. But Bo Nix did a little bit of everything. He threw for a touchdown. He ran for a touchdown, and he even caught a touchdown as Bucky Irving threw a touchdown pass. He's 2 for 2 on the year, I believe, and another really solid game for him. But another big story from this game was the offensive creativity that we saw from Oregon, right? You saw Bo do his thing, but the new wrinkle in there with the receiving touchdown on the trick play from Bucky Irving. You also saw Josh Connerly get a big man touchdown on his birthday. So we love that storyline. That's always fun to follow. They changed his number to 94, I believe, for this game. So interesting to see a couple of wrinkles thrown in there. And they did a really good job of selling that. And what was interesting for Oregon's offense in this one for me was how the trickery was used so early. And I think they really used that to their advantage to kind of punch Colorado in the mouth, keep them off balance, keep them guessing. So that was really fun to see. And we even saw a Noah Sewell touchdown in this game for the Ducks. If you guys have been following Noah Sewell's journey for a while, obviously before he got to Oregon as a recruit playing at Orem High School, a major powerhouse out in the state of Utah, Noah Sewell started on both sides of the ball as a phenomenal linebacker, but also as a running back. That's part of the reason he had this billing of a jumbo athlete coming out of high school before he got to the college ranks. We've heard about his versatility for so long, and it was really fun to see him get involved out of the backfield. It's something that we're kind of surprised we haven't seen before now, but given how Oregon has been so willing, I guess you could say, to go under center in an I form this year, that 14J formation, it makes a lot more sense. I know that it's not a wrinkle that we usually see in the Oregon offense, but seeing Noah Sewell involved in the running game is always going to be a major plus. And I think that there was this other note from the game that was super unique. Shout out to the Oregon Athletic Department for hooking us up with these notes. Oregon became the first FBS team since at least 1996 to have a receiving touchdown by an offensive lineman, Josh Connerly, a receiving touchdown by a quarterback, Bo Nix, and a rushing touchdown by a defensive player, Sewell, in the same game. No other FBS team has achieved all three in a single season, let alone the same game. So that was interesting to see Oregon just kind of go into their bag of tricks in a bunch of different ways this weekend against the Buffs. Just digging into some more of the top performances on the day. Bucky Irving really shined on the ground in this one, carried the ball only 11 times for 120 yards, averaging 10.9 yards a carry against the Buffs on the ground. His 65-yard run was the longest of his career and was really a thing of beauty if you were watching this game. It looks like the Buffs had him dead to rights in the backfield, had him totally wrapped up, but he was able to just shimmy and really showed some awesome agility, short area burst, balance, ability to change direction, and just streaked up the sideline in that one. So a phenomenal run from Bucky Irving as he just continues to put on a show for this Oregon offense this year. I think just every week we see these Oregon running backs step up to the plate. Noah Whittington also had a touchdown. No touchdown through on the ground for Bucky Irving, but like we talked about, he had that passing touchdown to Bo Nix. But I think every week we see Bucky Irving, we see Noah Whittington step up as the premier running back duo in the Pac-12. And I think that's really evident at this point. A couple other strong backfields you can look at for sure. You have USC, who has a prolific offense. You have UCLA, who has Zach Charbonnet, but he's really the main story on the ground, as well as DTR. Not really so much a 1-2 punch like we see with Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington, but they're just phenomenal, and they continue to make the impact of the game in a variety of ways. We saw a little bit of Sean Dollars in this one. He had 6 carries, but only had about 15 yards. And Kilowana Hassan-Ritter got in a little bit there at the end with some of the backups, as did Ty Thompson on offense. So those are some of the strong performances that we saw. Really good games from Terrence Ferguson and Maliki Mataval. Maliki got in the end zone again, and Terrence Ferguson had a nice little catch and run to get more involved. We saw some Patrick Herbert. Cam McCormick was also involved. He didn't register any catches this game, but I love how we keep seeing the tight ends involved on a week-to-week basis. Super strong performance from that group of tight ends. That's really just a special one for Oregon, and I think they're only going to continue to get stronger. You have Kenyon Sadiq coming in with the 2023 class as an athlete. He's going to be playing tight end. Ducks are also going after Jamari Johnson, the Louisville commit out of Inglewood. If you guys haven't read my update on Jamari Johnson, definitely go over to ducksdigest.com and read that. That's going to be an interesting recruitment. He tells me he's planning to take an official visit to Oregon before making a final decision on his recruitment. So that'll be a fun one to follow as always. What else do we have on the Oregon offense here before we wrap up that side of the ball? 40-plus points in 8 straight games. The last time Oregon scored 40-plus in 8 straight games was 2014, and they had, at that point, 27 straight wins when scoring 40-plus. I think they're saying that was or maybe that's now 27 straight wins when scoring 40-plus, but they're the only FBS team to score 40-plus points 8 times this season. And I think that this game was really what we expected to see. For Oregon, they came in and they took care of business against the Buffs. For the record, my score prediction for this game was 63-13, so I wasn't spot on, but I feel like there might have been a little bit more room for Oregon to score there. I know they had a 4th down inside the red zone of Colorado that got stopped. So maybe if Oregon was able to, play a little bit more crisply on some of those possessions, they would have been able to do it. But just kind of wanted to bring that up to mention that. Oregon's offense on fourth down, they were 1 for 2 in this game, 14 for 18 on the season, which is the best in the Pac-12. This is a total 180 from what we saw last year under Mario Cristobal and Joe Moorhead. They just weren't really known as that aggressive team that would go for it on fourth down. But this year's team is in the position where they can get out to early leads and then really just put their pedal to the metal. And then that way you put yourself in the position where you're leaving no doubt. Come second half, you are leaving no doubt. Oregon's getting these commanding wins. And this was a win that they really needed, especially with how their schedule shakes out the rest of the year. You got Washington this week, Utah the next week, Oregon State that final week of the regular season. And if you take care of all that, take care of your business, and you win all those games, they very well may be on a collision course with USC to meet them in the Pac-12 title game. So I think that's most of the story with Oregon's offense. We didn't see any Chase Cota in this game, so there wasn't any need for him to play. He got banged up in that Cal game, and we're still waiting on official word from Lanning about what his status is heading into this important week against Washington. We'll probably ask him tonight when we have our press conference with him. That's scheduled for around 6:45. So make sure you guys stay tuned in. Stay locked in with me on Twitter on @mtorres sports. That's always where you can find the fastest updates on my end before I can write a story, get a video recorded, what have you. So we're gonna have to see what happens there. But I liked what I saw from Troy Franklin. He only really had one big catch that caught a lot of people's attention. One catch for 41 yards. 25 of those yards came after the catch, and he had some really shifty moves on that run, had some good stiff arms as well. So I think Troy Franklin's physicality continues to be something that impresses me about his game. Certainly hasn't been a facet of his game that he's been really known for. Dante Thornton had an explosive catch and run in this game. 2 catches for 17 yards. 22 of those yards came after the catch. So it wasn't a super impressive day in terms of like amazing performances from any one player other than Bo Nix, I guess. But we had Bucky Irving go for over 100 yards this year. I think that was the first time he did that, first time he went over 100 yards on the ground this season. But it's been an impressive game, impressive thing to watch, impressive season for Oregon's offense. They continue to just go pedal to the metal, and they're firing on all cylinders, which sounds like a cliche with the firing on all cylinders, but they're really doing it. 284 passing yards, and you had 195 yards on the ground, averaging 5 yards a carry, and that's exactly where you want to be. Maybe expected it to be a little bit more impressive from a statistical standpoint against the Colorado defense that hasn't been very impressive this year, but it is what it is. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break here for those of you listening to us on the audio platforms, but don't go anywhere. We got more Oregon football talk, breaking down the win over Colorado after this. Welcome back to the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres. We're continuing our breakdown of Oregon's 49-10 win over the Colorado Buffaloes on the road in Boulder. Appreciate you guys that are tuned in here live on YouTube. Reminder to like the video and subscribe to the channel. That is a tremendous help for what I'm doing covering the Oregon Ducks. Appreciate you guys being here as always. So let's get into the defense a little bit in this game for Oregon. They allowed a season low 10 points to the Colorado Buffaloes, something that I think a lot of us expected. Colorado's offense had been struggling all year. JT Shrout wasn't really anything special. When I'm looking at this defensive performance for Oregon, I think there's 2 things that really stand out to me. The first one has to be Christian Gonzalez's performance in this game against his former team. Christian Gonzalez has been really one of the main contributors, one of the main faces of this Oregon defense on the year. And what does he do with his first game back against the Buffs? He comes away with 2 interceptions. Should one of those have been a pick six? Probably, but we can't do anything about the calls. I thought that he was trying to get in to the end zone on that one, but just like to see him make those plays, see how he glides as a runner. It looks so effortless for him, but you can tell he's a playmaker, and you want to see him get involved with the ball in his hand. One of the coolest moments from the game was after that second interception of JT Shrout. You see him kind of run out of bounds, and JT Shrout's over there, kind of in the area, in the vicinity to make a tackle if need be. And then Christian Gonzalez puts up the 2 right in front of JT Shrout's face. And it looked like he went from the interaction. It looked like Shrout was trying to tap him on the head, like, all right, good job, man, because they were former teammates. But after Gonzo did that, he kind of tried to just shove his face out of the way. So Christian Gonzalez is a soft-spoken guy, but it's really fun for me, just being, a football fan. It's fun to see that energy and kind of that back and forth interaction, because Christian Gonzalez has really been the story for Oregon's secondary this year, the most consistent performer that they have. Granted, there was a little bit of a miscommunication on Colorado's lone touchdown of the day, a deep pass to Jordan Tyson over the top of the defense. It looked like there was a miscommunication between Steve Stevens and Christian Gonzalez. So that was probably the biggest blemish for Oregon from a defensive standpoint. Here's another interesting stat for Oregon as we kind of shift away from Christian Gonzalez. I mean, we can't find enough good things to say about him. Definitely a bummer that this might be his only season as a Duck, seeing that he just continues to elevate that draft stock on a week-to-week basis. He is the real deal at cornerback. He had that blocked field goal, also making a special teams impact against Cal last week on the road in Berkeley. But talking about this Oregon defense, that second story that I wanted to get into was that it looked like I was looking at the stats and looking at the highlights. Oregon was without DJ Johnson in this game, which isn't a huge surprise, seeing that he got banged up and had to exit the game twice against Cal last week. But Oregon has some guys that they were able to move around a little bit and get them some good playing time. Braden Swinson saw some good snaps in this one. They can obviously lean on Mace Funa as a veteran who holds down that other side of the line. But no DJ Johnson in this one, which made it interesting that they weren't able to get more of a push along that offensive line. They didn't have any sacks in this game, which I thought was pretty interesting given how much Colorado's offensive line has struggled this year. I don't think that there's any guys that really blow you away from a talent standpoint along the offensive line for the Buffs. So you want to see a little bit more from the front seven for Oregon. But Mikey G saying here that Swinson got in there for some contain. I thought that he had his good moments, but just as a group, I thought it wasn't as impressive from a pressure standpoint as we were maybe expecting to see. But I'm not going to complain about a 39-point win. I mean, at that point, if you're complaining too much, you're kind of just splitting hairs. So good to see more of Braden Swinson. I'm surprised we haven't seen more of him this year. But maybe that's just because DJ Johnson's been that good. Mace Funa has been pretty solid. And then along the interior of the defensive line, you saw Keonware Hudson get involved, Jordan Riley, Casey Rogers, kind of the same deal with them. They've been really stout in the interior. The Oregon defense allowed under 150 rushing yards for the 8th time in 9 games this season. So Oregon's run defense has continually been a strength all year, and that continues to be the case. I think the two biggest strengths that you really have right now are Christian Gonzalez and also this run defense, which is going to really come in handy, especially with the couple teams that you have coming up this on the schedule here. I think that UW is probably more of a pass first team versus Utah. Utah is definitely a team that wants to establish themselves in the trenches. I think that you can expect a lot of running from Utah early on in that game. They're a little bit banged up. I believe actually Whittingham had somebody announce that somebody was out for the season this year. I retweeted it on my Twitter timeline, so let me double check. Kyle Whittingham announced that Van Fillinger has suffered a season-ending injury, a lower leg injury. So that is a defensive lineman, outside linebacker, I believe, for the Utes. He's one of their better players. So that's an interesting update there, no doubt. Let's see what else we can talk about with this defense. All right, it looked like I didn't actually see that Jamal Hill had gotten hit with targeting. Okay, yeah. It looks like the Ducks are going to be without Jamal Hill for the first half against Washington, which I think is a significant loss. Given the safety depth that they have, it doesn't really seem like anyone's like really emerged as the undeniable guy at safety for Oregon. I will say Bennett Williams has been really, really strong this year. I think he's probably in the conversation for one of, if not the best open field tackler on this team. And I don't want to take that away from him, But I think from last year to this year, the playmaking that we saw from Bennett Williams hasn't necessarily been there. And I'm not trying to critique the guy super hard. I think that's probably a direct product of the pass rush not being as consistent as this team would want it to be. But he's been one of those solid guys for the Oregon secondary. He's the most experienced safety in that room. But Jamal Hill is right there behind him. Seeing that he kind of broke out late in the 2019 season, you have a little bit of Steve Stevens. He's getting a lot of playing time as well. Other guys in that safety room, you have J.J. Greenfield. Maybe we see J.J. Greenfield get a little bit more playing time against Washington in this next week. He's been someone that's been really solid. I think you're probably a little bit more comfortable easing him in there a little bit more. He played a lot of special teams for the Ducks these past couple of years, but given his steady improvement on a week-to-week basis and just how much football he's played, I think that you're a little bit more comfortable putting Greenfield out there for some more significant snaps. But that'll be interesting to see on Jamal Hill and see how that impacts Oregon's secondary. I'm sure that we'll get to ask Dan about Jamal Hill's targeting. They'll probably appeal that, and that's happened twice, I think, because we had Jeffrey Bossa that was out for the first half of the game against Colorado. Keith Brown filled in for him, and I thought Keith Brown did well. He came up with a fourth down tackle against Colorado. So good to get him some reps and some confidence. You saw some more Jackson LeDuc as well. Darren Barkins came away with a fumble recovery late in the game. So nice to see Oregon force 3 turnovers against the Buffs, and they didn't have any turnovers of their own. But Oregon had DJ Johnson and Jeffrey Bossa. I think those are the 2 targeting suspensions that they've had to deal with this year. They tried to appeal those both, and they were both unfortunately denied. So that's definitely a tough break for Oregon. But overall, a pretty solid day from the defense. I think that you expected a dominant showing, and the numbers largely supported that. Aside from that big explosive play, I don't think there was anything super, super concerning from the Oregon defense. I think that the pass rush kind of is what it is at this point. It's just a matter of getting that consistency. That's what you really want. You want to have multiple guys that can, emerge for you. And in large part this season, it's been DJ Johnson and Brandon Dorless. So maybe in the back end of this season, we get one of these guys, another guy that can really emerge off the edge. I think that Casey Rogers on the interior has been doing a great job of collapsing the pocket, and he doesn't get enough praise for how well he's doing. And then Keon Ware-Hudson, I think he's kind of working back. He got a little bit banged up earlier on in the year. And then we'll also see, I don't think I saw Taki Taimani out there. So makes sense that you didn't necessarily need to get him into this game, seeing that it was a game you were expected to win by quite a lot. And that's what they did. So I think that's another good thing for the Oregon defense and Oregon's whole team as a whole is you didn't trot guys out there that didn't need to be out there. You still won by 39 points. You got those style points that I think a lot of fans had been wanting to see. And you go into this week, hopefully feeling a little bit healthier and then able to get, guys like Coda and Taimani back for this big game against Washington. So overall, solid day from Oregon's defense. You love to see the turnovers. You want to see some more pressure. That's kind of been the consistent. They also could have had another interception that I think it was Brian Addison almost came away with. So that was a bummer to see him drop that interception. But overall, a pretty solid day for them. You can't critique that big of a win too hard. But again, you want to see some more pressure there. Looks like we got a couple questions here. Let's see. Cascadia Surfrider asks, Max, you feel if Bo can continue at this pace and get the Ducks into the CFP, he should get it, the Heisman. His numbers were better than Stroud in the same kind of weather conditions this past weekend too. Yeah, I think that he's certainly not doing anything to hurt his Heisman resume, his Heisman Trophy chances. I think that unfortunately with the way that the Heisman Trophy works, you almost need to be in the CFP conversation in order to have that relevancy. But the way that he's been able to improvise, he's not relying on his legs too much. I love like that opening pass to Chris Hudson when he was able to run out of the pocket a little bit and then just hit him with a dot on the run. I thought was beautiful. But he really looks like he's turned a new leaf and he's taking care of the ball. So if he keeps producing at this clip, I think that he should maybe get an invite to New York. His performances have been just so remarkable that it's impossible to ignore at this point. So I think that if he keeps doing what he's doing, if Oregon wins the Pac-12 and is able to be further into the conversation with the CFP rankings, we'll have the new rankings on Tuesday, I believe. I kind of expect Oregon to be maybe in that 6 or 7 range. We'll see how the losses from Clemson and Alabama shake up the rankings. I think that bodes well for Oregon because they keep winning the games that they're supposed to win. So I'm not going to go ahead and predict that Nix is going to win the Heisman Trophy award, but I think given some of the shakeup, Oregon's taking care of their business. I think I wouldn't be super shocked at this point to see him get an invite. But like I said, Oregon has to be squarely involved, I think, with the playoff rankings in order for him to ultimately get that invite. And these next 3 weeks are going to be huge for his Heisman resume because they're playing, I think as of right now, their next 3 opponents should all be ranked with Washington and Oregon State and Utah. Actually, because I think Oregon State actually fell out of the poll after this most recent batch. So yeah, Washington's in there at 24, Utah is in there at 13, Oregon's at 6, and then Oregon State received 3 votes. So it'll be interesting to see how Bo Nix's Heisman chances continue to evolve here through this season. All right, kind of one last section I wanted to get into. Big picture takeaways from Oregon. Actually, no, sorry. Looking ahead to Oregon's rivalry matchup against Washington. Lanning was asked about the rivalry a little bit against UW, and he said that it's not a game that's any different, but there is an expectation given that it is a rivalry game. So him and Bo also said that there's been aspects of the preparation that have been working for us this year. So why would we change that heading to this one game just because it's a rivalry? But Nix, Lanning, Dillingham, a whole bunch of this Oregon roster is about to get their first taste of the rivalry against Washington. But Oregon opens up as a 12.5-point favorite against the Huskies. They've won the last 3 matchups against Washington. I was in Seattle for last year's win. That was a cold, rainy, windy night. But Oregon plays Washington at home in Eugene. 4:00 kickoff. I believe that's on Fox. Super stoked to be back in Eugene for that game. Had to get back out for one more game this year, which is awesome. So Husky Hate Week is officially here, but Lanning also said, he was acknowledging the rivalry. He said he has a tremendous amount of respect for UW, but you don't want to play to the circumstance. You just want to stick to your process and show up for the big games and take care of business. I think another big thing that was really good for Oregon coming off of this Colorado game, and Lanning said it himself, was that this is one of the more complete games that they've played on the season. They got to finish the game off closer to the way that they wanted to, and they expected to be dominant, and for the most part, they were in this game. So it may not have been a super pretty win. I think they could have ran it up even more, but I think getting to that completeness is something that's kind of been eluding Oregon for a lot of this season, even though they've been able to get commanding wins. There's been some moments where there's been some hiccups. There's been some drop-offs. We talked about the garbage time points that Oregon's defense sometimes tends to surrender, but that didn't happen against Colorado, so that was good. That was an improvement over the Cal game. But Washington has a really strong offense with Michael Penix running the show at quarterback. I think that their run game has usually been a strong suit for them. So I think that they present a pretty balanced offensive attack for this Oregon defense. You got Rome Odunze at wide receiver. I think he's one of their better players that I'm excited to see. And Oregon's going against a lefty. I think that's an interesting little storyline. The first time they've gone against a lefty this year. And Michael Penix has played a ton of football. So even though he seems like he's kind of cooled off a little bit after a super strong start to this season, I still think he presents a very solid challenge for them, for this defense at quarterback. And then Washington's defense, even though they have a offensive-minded head coach, I think Washington's defense is going to continue to be something that they pride themselves on. They always have a solid defense. I think they have some good talent up in the interior that Oregon's going to have their hands full with a little bit. Kind of a final note from the Colorado game, because Oregon was able to get up so much, it looks like we didn't see much of Alex Forsythe playing center in that game against Colorado in the second half. We saw some more of Ryan Walk. We saw some Jackson Powers Johnson. So maybe that was a conscious move by the coaching staff to kind of rest up Forsythe and some of those starters along the offensive line for a really important game here against Washington. So just another benefit of taking care of business and winning those games you're supposed to win and doing it in dominant fashion. That is of the utmost importance. So Should be an interesting week. We're going to be talking with Dan Lanning this evening for his weekly press conference. I know some people are commenting here about the Auburn connection with Lanning. Not going to get to that in this episode, but maybe on a future episode, we can dive into that a little bit more. But that'll do it for this episode. Just wanted to get a quick recap and analysis of Oregon's latest win over Colorado as we turn the page to the Washington Huskies, Oregon's biggest rival, or you could say it's Oregon State. Let me know what you think about who Oregon's biggest rival is in the Pac-12 or just in college football in general. But that'll do it for this episode, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you like the video and hit the subscribe button and follow me on Twitter at mtorresports. And don't miss out on the latest written content covering the Oregon Ducks over on ducksdigest.com. We got a lot of recruiting coverage over there as well. I talked to a bunch of modern day guys recently who were out at Oregon. The hoop season starts today as well. You got the women tipping off against Northwestern at 3 p.m. Pacific, and then the men against Florida A&M at 7 Pacific, I believe. So it is a busy day for Duck sports, and we're glad we got to hop on the podcast and talk about the latest win for Dan Lanning and the Ducks on the football field. But that'll do it. Thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.